After World War II, America basically decided, let's take all these soldiers, traumatized but horny, and give them houses so they can produce an avalanche of babies. Enter the GI Bill of 1944, which handed out low-interest mortgages like Halloween candy. Developers like William Levitt built Levittowns in New York in 1947, rows of cookie-cutter houses selling for $7,990, or about $110,000 today. And that's less than the cost of a Tesla Model Y, by the way. And unlike Tesla, your Levittowns home didn't need a software update every 6 months. Home ownership at the time skyrocketed. In 1940, only 44% of Americans owned homes. By 1960, it was over 60%. And wages, they actually kept up with housing. A single-income household could afford a mortgage, a car, and still enough disposable cash to take the kids to Disneyland and buy Mickey-shaped churros that didn't cost $12 each. And no, I'm not bitter. By the 1970s, inflation was raging, but wages still grew. The average house cost about $23,400 in 1970, which is around $190,000 today, while median household income was roughly $9,870, or about $80,000 today. The ratio of home price to income was about 2.5 to 1 or 3 to 1 depending on the area, which was quite good compared to today, where it's closer to 6 to 1 nationwide in the United States, and if you're in San Francisco, that ratio is just in the just give up and live in a shipping container level ratio. But then came the 1980s, when Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher looked at the financial system and basically said, let's make this a cocaine-fueled casino. And to be honest, sounds like fun. Was it a good idea? Maybe not. Mortgage markets were deregulated, the savings and loan crisis blew up, and housing increasingly became an investment vehicle, not just a place to sleep and occasionally argue about who ate the last slice of pizza, which in a lot of households is kind of a death sentence. By the 1990s, banks had figured out the ultimate money printing machine: mortgage-backed securities. These were bundles of home loans sliced, diced, and repackaged until nobody knew what was actually inside. It was like the modern-day Labubu box. Except in this case, it's kind of like taking 12 different people's Labubus, chopping them up into little pieces, throwing them into a blender, and selling it as a Labubu soup. That's what Wall Street did to mortgages, and investors bought it, because who cares about the soup when the label says it's low risk? So the result of this was housing stopped being primarily about shelter. It became about returns. People started talking about flipping houses like they were flipping pancakes. HGTV turned somewhat from an interior design home living channel to a how to make a quick buck version of entertainment. From 1997 to 2006, US housing prices doubled, but wages, they just waved politely and stayed put. Lenders threw out loans like Oprah giving out cars. Didn't have a job? Well, that didn't matter. No assets? Who cares? You get a loan. You get a loan. Everybody gets a loan. This was the age of what would be called ninja loans. No income, no job, no assets, no problem. But then, of course, after all of this came 2008. The housing bubble exploded, vaporizing trillions of dollars in wealth. Nearly 8 million Americans lost their homes to foreclosure, while neighborhoods looked like post-apocalyptic movie sets. And yet, the very people who caused the crisis, the big banks and private equity firms, they got bailed out. Taxpayers footed the bill, homeowners lost everything, and then, this is the part that makes you want to scream into a pillow, Wall Street swooped in to buy foreclosed houses on the cheap to recoup what they lost. Blackstone alone bought up tens of thousands of homes, becoming one of America's largest landlords in this process, which is kind of like a burglar robbing your house and then charging you rent to live in it. And now, as if things weren't already terrible after that, housing became a global money laundering scheme. Rich elites from around the world started using real estate to stash cash. In London, luxury apartments were bought as investments by Russian oligarchs, Middle Eastern oil tycoons, and Chinese billionaires. By 2019, Transparency International estimated that £4.2 billion, and no, not little fat pockets that a lot of people have, but the actual currency, £4.2 billion worth of UK property was bought with suspicious wealth. In the hippie capital of Canada, Vancouver, by 2016, about 20% of their condos were empty or barely occupied. Locals called them ghost condos, which sounds spooky, but in reality it was just depressing. Entire towers dark at night, with no ghosts to be seen. In fact, if ghosts actually occupied these apartments, they'd be more occupied than they actually were. And the governments, They loved it because foreign money juiced the GDP of the city, of the province, of the nation. It boosted construction and made cities look global. Who cares if no one can actually afford to live there locally? At least the skyline looks pretty for the billionaires to see. By the late 2010s and 2020s, the idea of house as a home was almost secondary. Politicians, economists, and financial advisors all pushed the same line. Your home is your best investment. The translation is, don't count on pensions, don't count on social security, don't count on you investing on your own. Also, don't count on wages, but that's not even worth saying these days. Just buy a house, cling to it like a lifeboat, and hope that it appreciates enough for you. And here's the other thing. Homeowners, they vote. A lot. So politicians trip over themselves to protect private property values, which means policies are designed to not make housing cheaper, but to keep prices inflated. Honestly, nothing wins elections more like promising people that their house will always be worth more than they paid for it. It's one of the only bipartisan issues in the entire United States. Democrats, Republicans, everyone agrees your house price must appreciate forever. Now, today in the United States, the median home price is around $420,000. And keep in mind, in 1980, it was $64,000, or about $240,000 in today's money. That means in the span of one generation, houses basically doubled in real cost for the average person. And wages, well, median income in 1980 was about $21,000 a year, roughly $75,000 today, and the median income is essentially the same, $74,500. Virtually over 45 years, wages haven't moved, but house prices have skyrocketed. And this is why young people are losing their minds. It's not like they don't want to work, it's that they could work 3 jobs, sell a kidney, and moonlight as a background extra on Law & Order and still not scrape together enough for a down payment on an average house. So who's buying all these houses? Hedge funds, private equity, financial behemoths like Blackstone, Invitation Homes, and American Homes for Rent. By 2022, corporate landlords made up nearly 24% of home sales in cities like Atlanta and Charlotte. Which means you're not losing a bidding war to another young couple. You're not even losing it to foreign billionaires. You're losing it to Goldman Sachs in a Patagonia vest. And when these companies buy homes, they tend to jack up rents. So the median asking rent in the US hit $2,029 a month last year. That's more than the average Social Security check in total. Which means Grandma literally can't rent a studio apartment in Phoenix without also live streaming herself playing Fortnite to make ends meet. Then there's also zoning. Ah yes, the least sexy but most destructive villain of this story. About 75% of residential land in US cities is zoned exclusively for single-family homes, which means no duplexes, no apartments, no multi-family housing, just endless seas of suburban houses, cul-de-sacs, and people who own 4 different live, laugh, love signs. Whenever anyone proposes changing zoning laws to allow more density, suburban homeowners lose their minds. Suggest building an apartment in their neighborhood, and suddenly they're clutching their pearls like you just announced plans to open a nuclear test site in their cul-de-sac. And on the to be fair side, could you blame them? A lot of these families bought a house in a quiet neighborhood hoping to raise a family there and not get woken up by construction noise at 7 a.m. every day for the next 5 years. And one of the funny things I see in the financial space these days is actually whenever housing prices are skyrocketing or are doing really well, this is viewed as a really good thing on these networks. They'll always use the same line in some sort of way of like, the housing market is really hot right now. Yet what that means for like the average young person is that things are getting really expensive right now. And I kind of view this as like, imagine if hospitals were announcing record high levels of disease right now, and then all the news networks were just cheering everything of like, yes, it's a really hot business right now. And so it's not just the networks. I mean, there's lots of problems. The next one here is actually the central banks. You see, after 2008 and again after the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, the Federal Reserve printed money like it was running a drunken office max. The Fed's balance sheet ballooned from under $1 trillion in 2008 to $9 trillion by 2022. Did wages rise? No. Did housing prices rise? Yes. Like a helium balloon full of your crushed dreams. Sheet money flooded into assets, stocks, bonds, housing. The people who already owned property saw their wealth skyrocket, while the people trying to buy and not get left behind, well, they were left behind. It's like hosting a dinner party where all the rich people got steak and you got handed a single saltine cracker. And here's where things start to get a little bit more ugly, is that baby boomers now hold over 50% of the wealth in the United States. Millennials, 6%. Gen Z, Essentially nothing. And yet young people are consistently told it's their fault. Stop buying avocado toast, remember those days? As if skipping brunch will somehow close a $200,000 payment gap. It's essentially financial gaslighting going on in the world right now. And so you can see all of the problems right now, but the question is, what will the future of housing look like? So first we're going to take a look at the rise of what economists call the permanent renter class. Ooh, goody, sounds awesome. Which is a polite way of saying, congratulations, your kids will never own anything except for crippling student loans and a decorative plant that they can't afford to water. So right now, it just looks like young people are going to continuously grow with being forever renters, which means more insecurity for these people, constant moving, and landlords who forget to fix the mold problem until your bathroom looks like a science fair project on fungi. And this could lead to some really bad stuff. I mean, if housing keeps going this way, we are staring at a massive social instability. When entire generations realize they've been permanently locked out of wealth building, bad things tend to happen. And by bad things, I mean populism, radical politics, maybe even violent protests. You can't dangle the American dream in front of these people for 80 years and then say, sorry, actually the dream is now reserved for hedge funds and oligarchs, but please enjoy your stay in your cardboard box. I mean, look at history. Skyrocketing land costs helped fund revolutions in the 18th century France. When peasants couldn't afford bread or shelter, they didn't just post sad memes about it, they stormed the Bastille. Housing inequality is the kind of thing that can break societies, and unlike TikTok trends, that doesn't just fade after a few weeks. So what does this all mean? Well, we could be heading into a new form of modern feudalism, except instead of lords and castles, it's landlords and condos. A small group of asset holders collects rent, while everyone else spends a lifetime paying tribute to their overlords. The 21st century serfdom comes with Wi-Fi and Netflix, but it's still serfdom. And while you may not be plowing fields for your landlord, instead, you'll be Venmoing him $2,400 a month for the privilege of having a studio apartment above a vape shop. Progress, everyone. Progress. So the future of housing, I don't think should just be about finance or wealth, to be honest. It should be about trying to hold the society together, whether an economy can remain stable, and whether young people have any reason to believe that the system isn't rigged beyond repair. Unless something changes, the answer is going to look a lot less like the American dream and a lot more like a nightmare with granite countertops. So if you liked this video, make sure to click on my documentaries playlist to see more videos just like this, and make sure, well, to click on that, and I'll see you guys in my next video in just a few seconds.